Welcome to New Jersey House of Hope. This is Family Forum, Family Focus. Like every Monday night, we have Family Focus on New Jersey House of Hope. I want to welcome you to Family Focus and trust that, that we would have another rewarding, informal session as I seek to present information about the family to you. It's a delight to be in studio and to be able to share with you from God, well, not necessarily from God's word, but some concepts that the social scientists are exploring and have explored that are very applicable to our families. So these are some of the things that we want to share with you tonight. And I trust that we will have a wonderful time. Nevertheless, we can ask God's guidance and God's wisdom. So I'll invite you wherever you are to bow your heads and pray with me. Father in heaven, we thank you for today. We thank you for the blessings of today. It was not that cold, and so we say thank you. We thank you for the sunshine, and now we thank you that it's gotten a little colder. But we pray, Lord, that as we come before you now, that you would please help us to understand these concepts so that we can organize and order our families in a way that would seek to glorify and to honor your name. Please guide us and help us that we'll be able to comprehend the information we ask in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, tonight we want to take a look at family systems. I hinted to the fact that we will be coming to family systems, and we just kind of complete conflict resolution. We haven't fully completed it, but the nature of the information, it made me have to slip into family systems before we can come back to some other stuff on as it relates to conflict resolutions. So we just want to move now to family systems here a little bit and help you to understand. And the truth is that family relationships are very complex. Whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, it is very complex, and no two families are exactly alike. You may be comprised of a nuclear family, and you may have the same number of children. You may have the same number of gender of children in your family, 2 boys and 2 girls. All of that might be equal, all right? But your family still is not exactly alike. They might be very similar, not even in its composition, but in its function. It may be very similar, but they would never be exactly alike. Despite these differences, some theories suggest that all families fall into the same model of the emotional system. The same model of the emotional system. And this concept is referred to as the family system theory. The family system theory. So because families, all families have some kind of emotional system that, it navigates through, then we want to look at what we call the family system or family systems. And there's a theory in family systems that was developed by Dr. Brown in the mid to late 60s, 1960s. Family system, I guess the question is asked, what is family systems theory? And family systems theory is a concept of looking at the family as a cohesive emotional unit. So each family is a unit. It's cohesive because you are a family, but because we all express ourselves and we all do have emotions and we express ourselves via those emotions, we have become a cohesive emotional unit. And because family relationships affect each other, I am married to my wife, so that's a relationship. I have a son As a male to a male, we have a relationship. My relationship to my daughter as a male to a female may be different, say vice versa to the mother. And, you know, brother to sister is very different to mother and child, or parent and child. So there are so many different systems that we have. According to the family systems theory, family members are intensely emotionally connected. And psychiatrists, I said, the psychiatrist, Dr. Murray, not Murray, but Dr. Bowen, Murray Bowen, that's the name, Dr. Murray Bowen, developed the family systems theory. And in this regard, in regards to the family systems, Dr. Bowen was described as one of those who are those rare human beings who had a genuinely new idea. So this was this is kind of contemporary in a sense. Even though it may have been applicable in years past, it did not develop sufficiently to enter the scheme of academia, not until Dr. Murray did it, and he started, you know, this study sometime between the mid to late 60s, and I guess this was not really properly developed, you know, properly developed till maybe in the 70s or thereabout. So family system theories talk about the family as a unit, as an emotional, cohesive unit. And because we are affected by our emotions, we express ourselves via our emotions. And because we are families, it affects the way we operate. So let's take a look now, try to get a little better understanding of what is family systems theory. Family systems theory states that a family functions as a system wherein each member plays a specific role and must follow certain rules. Okay? In this system, it says that the family the theory states that a family functions as a system. Each family is a system, and then I think I did alluded to that in a presentation earlier, that within the system there are other systems: the brother system, the brother-sister system, the sister-sister, the mother-daughter, mother-sons, father-daughter, father-sons, and so forth. And if you have extended families, if you have a grandparent living with that family, then you have an in-law system, and you would have a mother and child, and then you have a grandchild and a grandparent. So we have to take all those different systems into consideration. So the family functions as a system wherein each member plays a specific role and they must follow certain rules. We'll try to develop that as we go along. Now, based on the roles within the system, people are expected to interact with and respond to one another in certain ways. So you have to be able to interact. You're a part of this system, whether you like it or not. You know, you're a part of your family. And, you know, there's an old little saying that goes like this: you cannot always choose your family. Well, in a lot of cases, you don't choose your family. I mean, if I choose my wife, or, you know, we had some choices there, then I choose to marry my wife. Yes, I have chosen my wife as my family. But, you know, children are born into the system. They cannot choose what family they want to be born in. And so based on the roles within the system, people are expected to interact with and respond to one another in a certain way. Of course, respect would be one of those rules. Respect would be one of those rules. So there are patterns developed within the system. Okay? Over the years, you would observe family, you would ask questions, you would do research, and this is how the social scientists go about doing it. You know, they would observe, they would do various things, and they will see certain patterns. And because those patterns are consistent from family to family, you know, it becomes a theory as to how something can be done, or so how something is usually done. And you know, it explains human behavior and so forth. So patterns develop within the system, and each member's behaviors impact the other member in predictable ways. So if I have to relate, if I have to relate to my children, I always have to relate to them as a father. All right? And they always have to relate to me as their father. And I know growing up, there was some notion at some point in time that, you know, families, parents did not have to respect children, but children must always respect parents. You know, I kind of lived with that for a little bit, but now I do not subscribe to that. I would relate to my family, all of them, with respect. I might find myself, at times, I may find myself raising my voice to get their attention, to move immediately, because children these days, and especially in this culture, when I grew up, once you heard an instruction, you had to respond, you had to move. All right? You couldn't wait until you felt like you want to do it, or when you were pleased, or when you finished watching or texting or whatever you had to do. So sometimes I think that still remains with me, and I tend to relate to my children in that way. I ask them to, you know, I give an instruction, and, you know, they stuck around there, 5 minutes pass, and nobody's moving. And so sometimes, you know, I find myself having to kind of raise my voice. They may say yelling, but, you know, I'm trying to get their attention and let them know that I did give an instruction and I expect it to be carried out. So, you know, we communicate with each other, we relate with each other, and that impacts each member, each other's behavior in predictable ways. So we have to think about that. Now, depending on the specific system, these behavioral patterns can lead to either balance or dysfunction of the system, or both at various points in time. So we're saying that depending on the specific system, it may be, I've known situations in families where grown or adult sons, or well, not even grown and adult, but teenage sons, you know, began challenging their father, and the relationship has always been rocky, and sometimes they even experience not only quarrels but fights. In the culture that I grew up, they had that thing operating on you know, on a fairly regular basis. And I came to this country, and somebody who were born here, and the children were born here, actually explained the same thing to me. The gentleman said he actually had a fight with his son. And his son was just a teenager at the time, 17, 18. And he and his son had a fight because, you know, in his estimation, the son was disrespecting him. So we're saying, depending on the specific system, these behavioral patterns can lead to either balance, make the family works better, or dysfunction, disrupts the family functioning. Okay, when a family is not functioning well, we know that there will be a lot of tensions, there will be a lot of stressful situations, there will be a lot of problems and confusion in the home. So we have to remember that and understand that as well. So, why is family systems theory important? I guess that's the question we want to ask. Why is family system theories important? Now, according to Bowen's theory, even when people may feel they are disconnected from members of their family, the family still has a profound impact on their emotions and actions. Okay? They still have an impact on their emotions and their actions. So people feel they may be disconnected from members of their family. But they still have a connection because they are brothers, they are brother and sister, they are parents and children, you know, so there is that relationship that still exists. So even though they may feel disconnected from members of their family, the family still has a profound impact on their emotions and actions, whether they may be positive or negative. So if you are part of a family system and you become disconnected from your family, you know, you may feel as though you have let down the family, or you may feel like the family, you know, has separated themselves from you, right? So whether it's negative or positive, there is still a connection. There is still a connection that has to work there. And change in one person sparks change in other members of the family unit, how they act and how they feel as well. Okay? So when there's a change in the relationship between a parent and a child, because let me cite the examples that let me use the examples that I was citing earlier. You know, a father and a son might be at loggerheads, and every time they have a quarrel, the sisters may feel afraid, or the mother might feel that this may escalate into some kind of violence or even death. Because, you know, when men, their passions are overflowing and their emotions take over, you know, sometimes in those situations we do not stop to evaluate what we are doing. So when there's a change in a relationship with one, it sparks change in other members of the family unit, as affects how they act and feel as well. Okay? Now, we want to, let me give you one more. Now, interdependence can vary between different families. All families have some level of it among the members. Interdependence, not independence. When you are independent is when you are on your own, when you fight for yourself, when you fend for yourself, not fight, but fight as well. When you fend for yourself, when you are self-sufficient, you are independent. This is interdependence. I am dependent on you. And I know in the culture that I grew up, this was what created most of the problems. Because you would hear your father would tell you things like, two men can't live in the same house. Right? Meaning that he is the man who is providing for your needs, but you want to operate as though he's the child and you want to dictate how you live your life when he has to be taking care of you. And I think to some extent that is reasonable to say that as a parent, the relationship should be of such where I respect my parents, especially when I am still in a stage of dependence upon them. It may be a situation where one child or even a parent may be sick or incapacitated and may have to depend on other members of the family to take care of them in so many different ways. Maybe for their hygiene, maybe for their meals. And just think about it this way, because we said that once there is change in one member, then it affects the acts and the feelings, you know, how other members of the family acts and feels. But let's think about it this way. Let's say I have a child, or I may become incapacitated. I may become disabled, maybe an accident, maybe sickness. You know, people can get all kinds of sickness if we don't be careful. So it may be a sickness or something that caused me to be incapacitated. Now, I can't go out to work. That's a problem for the family because income is reduced. That's number one. Or income might stop totally. So everybody else may be affected then. But number two, I am immovable. And so I cannot move around and help myself. I need assistance. Somebody now has to maybe always be at home to help guide me, you know. And I'm glad that we're raising these things, because I observe these things happen when your folk start getting older in life. We still expect our older folk who have passed retirement age and into their 80s and so, we still expect them to be independent. And sometimes it is not possible, because after a while, the strain on the body, the body has eroded so much that sometimes, after people have grown, they are not able to do as much as they used to do. They have lost energy. They have gotten sick. Their bones become a little more brittle. Sometimes they become, they start having dementia and all these other different diseases, Parkinson's and so forth. So now they cannot function as they used to function before. And here they would need somebody, someone of the family members' attention. If a family is matured in terms of age and everybody grown and is out to work, then maybe you can come together and you can hire outside help to take care of your parent and things like that. But what I want to stick in here is to help people understand that at some point in time, somebody of your family may have these kinds of issues, if not in the younger days, at least when they become older, heading into the 80s and so forth. You may find that their movements become less and they're not able to help themselves as much. I have seen situations where children even reach the point of suggesting that their parents are pretending, and they have become a little antagonistic against their older folk because they think they can do better to help themselves, but they just want to depend on them. That's not necessarily so. And the best way to deal with that and to handle that kinds of situation is to observe and to ask questions and to be kind in, if you want to push your parent or an older folk, a grandparent or a great aunt or something, you want to push them to try to do a little more, you can test them out gently to ensure that they're experiencing the problem that they say they have and they're not just trying to be dependent. So interdependence is when when one person is dependent or when others are dependent upon someone or others. So interdependence can vary between different families, but all families have some level of it among its members. You have children in school, small toddlers, that's an interdependence system. Okay? Now, humans evolved to be interdependent on family members to promote cooperation among families that are necessary for things like shelter and protection. And that's what I was just alluding to. As human beings, when we enter into the world, we are dependent. Okay? We evolved to be interdependent on family members to promote cooperation among families that are necessary for things like shelter and protection. So when we are born, we are dependent. Sometimes it depends on our lives. You might even become to a mature age. But because of how life has turned out, how life has evolved, sometimes we remain independent. We remain dependent because the family might think it's important that one of the children keep going to school, or all the children remain in school, and so from high school they may be shifting over into college. And, parents may say, we want you to focus. And then your children become dependent on you because they have to have upkeep and so forth. All right. So Bowen believes that perhaps humans evolved to be interdependent on family members to promote cooperation among families. But in stressful situations, the anxiety that one person feels can spread among family members. And the interdependence become emotionally taxing rather than comforting. So I guess it's a different reaction, emotional reaction, feeling, whatever you want to call it. It might be different if you have children in school pursuing a degree, pursuing a career, and you know, okay, you expect that not to be for the rest of their lives. So you tend to be, expectant about it, because at some point in time they may come to an end. They may conclude their studies and commence a career. And we know that in some cases when they commence a career, that your hard work and investment would show fruits, and maybe in some ways you might benefit from that hard work and investment that you have made in that child's life. And so you can look forward expectantly. But in situations where it is not like that, for example, a child reached an accident. I remember years ago looking at, I can't remember if it wasn't an Olympics, it was something else, maybe the World Games or so. And this young Chinese girl, I think she probably was still in her teens, if not very, 20 or very close to 20. And she was doing the gymnastics on the bars, and then she flipped and missed the bar, fell on her head and became paralyzed. She was just about a teenager, maybe around 20 thereabout. So for the rest of her life, her situation would need somebody to take care of her. And if you belong to a family and your family have members, then obviously they should want to take care of you, even though you are now incapacitated and cannot move on your own. Now when this happens, this creates a different level of anxiety, stressful situations, because now you have to take care of her from her feeding, her meals, to her mobility, to her hygiene, and everything in between. Okay? So now that you have to take care of all of that, that lays stress on you, because the time that you may have had for recreation now has to be sacrificed for your sibling or your child or your cousin or whatever the arrangement of your family may be. So those stressful situations now create anxiety that one person feels, and when that one person is when one person is tipping over with anxiety and they are stressed out, what Bowen is saying is that the interdependence becomes emotionally taxing. All right? Because that young person, that older person, that child is dependent on you, and because you are worried and because you feel as though you are losing time to do what you want to do for yourself, and you have to surrender or sacrifice that time for some other person of your family, then it becomes taxing rather than comforting. And I think we can understand that. You just have to ask people who have family members with sicknesses or have family members suffering from things like Alzheimer's and dementia and so forth. In some cases, you have a family member who has been incarcerated. That could become taxing. Okay? Now, one person in the family unit who observes the bulk of the emotions of other members of the family, and this person is most likely to suffer from things like depression, alcoholism, and physical illness as a result. When one person takes the bulk or observes the bulk absorbs the bulk of the emotions, the stress, the anxiety. It falls on one person. You know, where I grew up, we had mostly the nuclear family. And in the nuclear family, most times mother is at home. And so the wife or the mother is expected to take care of all the home business and chores and activities. So if somebody was sick, mother became a nurse. If somebody was, had another problem, mother was all things to all people, to all family members. There will always be one person in the family unit who will end up in this kind of situation. And that could put a taxing on that one. And it doesn't only have to be with sickness and so forth. It could be financially, where you have a large family and maybe you have one breadwinner. Maybe the income is not even sufficient. You still have to worry about making bills and making ends meet. And that person could become, overtaxed. Maybe it's not even the situation. Maybe just a large family, just a large household. A relative might decide that they're, your neck of the woods is better for them to pursue a career. And so they ask to come and stay there for a couple of days until they can find something to do. And a couple of days turns into a couple of weeks. And then a couple of weeks turn into a couple of months. And those couple of months end up being 2 years. And now you start feeling the stress because that person has to be using everything in your home. And, whether you know it or not, whether it appears to be or not, of course, your bills are going to go up because that person may have to get their clothes ironed out. So they may use the iron. It may help to escalate your bills. The person might be, doing so many other different things, using up so many other resources. And so it can affect you, the breadwinner, or the person who is in charge in certain kinds of ways. It may be depriving one of your children from their privileges and from, what they anticipate or expected to would have been their resources. And now because that family member is there, that child is deprived. And so that child becomes anxious and emotional of the fact that, their resources are being channeled elsewhere. This shows the importance of families working together to conquer their problems rather than letting negative emotions draw them apart, or not draw them apart, but separate them from each other. All right? So, this system here, this family systems theory, there are 8 concepts of the family systems theory. 8 concepts of the family system theory that I would like to share with you. Number 1, you have the triangles. And number 2, you have differentiation of self. Then you have the nuclear family emotional process. You also have the family projection process, the multi-generational transmission process, the emotional cutoff process, the sibling positioning, and then you have the societal emotional process. So all of these are concepts within family systems. So let's take a look at triangles. Hopefully we can get somewhere with them tonight. In fact, despite the fact that triangles are more stable than dyads, there is always an odd person out. The 2 closer people sometimes. So what is this concept? Triangles represents the smallest stable network of human relationship systems. Okay? What is this saying is that a dyad, a relationship between 2 persons, is not stable enough. It lacks balance when there are just two persons. So the smallest stable network is when the relationship has three people. So that if one person is weak, then the other two might be able to balance out the one. In the dyad, if one person is weak, then the other person is left with all that stress. And so we can understand that in the triangle, where you have three persons, when one person is weakened out, somebody else, the other two are remaining strong for this one that is weakening out. And so it kind of brings balance to the whole setup, to the family setup. So you can have multiple triangles within the family, or you can have a larger group with many different sides, which eventually would turn into different triangles. Okay? So they're saying, Bowen is saying that the triangle or triangle relationships represent the smallest stable network of human relationships. So you need to have at least three persons. You need to have at least three persons to ensure that you have a stable relationship within the family. Okay? They haven't accounted for just a husband and a wife living together. But like I explained, if lots of times you would see that a husband and a wife may have difficulties or conflict, but their relationship could become very volatile if it's the two of them alone. Now, supposing that same couple had a child, that couple would tend to stick more together because of the child. Because the mother has a relationship with the child, she wants to remain in this relationship. And because the father has a relationship with the child, he wants to remain in the relationship with the child. And so their relationship with the child is kind of still linking to the other person who might be having the issue. I hope I try to explain that as simple as I can, because the child becomes the stable person in the relationship. The mother and the father, their relationship is not doing well, but that's the mother's child. So she's here because of the child. In some cases, the husband and wife would have already been divorced without children. There are many families, many husbands and wives who remain together even though they were not experiencing the best of relationships, but remained together because of the child or children. And so that is what I think Bowen they're talking about, that when they are three, it's better, it is stronger and better than if there are only two. So they're saying that three is the smallest stable network of relationships within the family. A three-person relationship is considered a building block for larger family systems. So the three persons, their relationship is considered a building block for larger family systems. A two-person relationship is too small and tension easily builds. Okay? Again, I can use the same situation to say, if you have a child, a husband and wife has a conflict, they both may not want the child to know that they are fighting. And so they tend to be more discreet when they have disagreements than if the two of them alone were living together. And you just think about it in your relationship. Okay? It could be, any other different arrangement, but it happens in relationships. Now, despite the potential for increased stability within the triangle, many triangles establish their own rules and exist with two sides in harmony and one side in conflict. All right, I think I was trying to explain that. Two sides are in harmony and one side are in conflict. In other words, every triangle has a weak point. So, You may find a relationship where husband and wife are the strong points, the strong two in the relationship. And let's say maybe an in-law is living with them. Mother-in-law, father-in-law, brother or sister-in-law, you know. You may find, okay, the husband and wife relationship becomes so strong. In another case, you may find that the mother and the child relationship is even stronger than the wife, than the spouse's relationship. So they have the relationship, they all three are in the relationship. But what the theory is saying is that sometimes, all the time, there's always a stronger bond between two of the three. So they refer to the weaker one, or the one that is not as strong in the bond, as the outside one or the weaker one. Okay? Now, it is common for children to become triangulated within their parents' relationship. And that's why I was talking so much about parent and children, because we're talking about family as well. And obviously, the relationship, the triangle would come more or less from the husband and wife relationship when they become father and mother. And so, because if they're starting a family, you know, unless they're unable to produce offsprings, you know, you don't just start a family to go and pick up some friend from across the street and somebody else from downtown and somebody else from over the river to come and decide, okay, this is going to be my family, right? When people become a family, when a husband and a wife come together in marriage, they try to produce offsprings. So, you know, your offsprings obviously would be a part of your family, and that right away starts the triangle. It is common for children to become triangulated within the parents' relationship. So what happens there is that the child somehow gets caught up in the relationship. Okay? The child gets caught up in the relationship, and the child, you know, sometimes, I alluded to that before, sometimes the mother starts paying more attention now to her child. And the father now is feeling like he's left out, like he's not being loved anymore. And you can visibly see that there's a strong bond between mother and child. Obviously, I said that in presentations before. That becomes obvious because if the mother has to breastfeed that child, she is bonding more with the child. So she has to breastfeed the child. She changes the child on a regular basis. Maybe she's home with the child. Daddy is out to work. So obviously there's a stronger bond that is building there. And after a while, in some cases, mothers find more meaningful relationship with their children rather than with their spouses. Even though they still have a relationship and still have some kind of working relationship, lots of times, you know, the mother end up bonding more with the children than with the husband, and the children even bonds less with the father in some cases. But these can go from one point to the next, okay? So it is common for children to become triangulated within this relationship, and you know they experience this kind of thing. Now, let's look at a differentiation of self. Differentiation. What is differentiation of self? Now, when people are differentiated, they can do two things well. When they're differentiated, they can do two things well. They can differentiate between emotional guidelines or guidance, their emotional guidance system, and they can differentiate between their emotional guidance system and their reasoning guidance system. So they can separate the two. They can be emotional on this side here and still be have the ability to rationalize on the other side. In other words, their ability to rationalize is not caught up with their emotions. They can separate those two and function normally. All right? So that's what the scientists are calling differentiation of self. So you can actually operate in two systems at the same time. This allows them to be guided by either system, and they can also differentiate themselves from other people. So your child or your spouse can differentiate themselves from you. In other words, they can be in an intimate relationship with you on this hand, and on the other hand, you know, they at times can remain separate. And some people like that. And sometimes when you have a spouse and you operate like that, they want to know how sometimes you show love, and then like sometimes you just don't want me around, like, because they can differentiate. There are times when they need that connection, and there are times when they can just, you know, remain by themselves and be just as comfortable and function just as normal. So to help you understand differentiation, that's what it is. It is the differentiating. You can do two things simultaneously and not have one confused by the other. Differentiation is a product of a way of thinking that translates into a way of being. So it has a lot to do with how you think. Okay, it's a way of thinking. And you can probably hear that in some people's language when they say you have to learn to be able to do different things at the same time. They call that I missed the term. Multitask. They would say things like you have to learn to multitask. It's a kind of multitasking at the same time, all right? So differentiation is a product of a way of thinking that translates into a way of being. If you think you can live with somebody, be intimate with them today, and tomorrow you do not have to be intimate with them, you still have the relationship, you still love them, but not every day you have to, you know, have the same expression, then that is differentiation as well. All right. It's also the ability to be in emotional contact with others, yet still autonomous in one's own emotional functioning. So you are connected to others emotionally, but you can separate whatever happens there with who you are emotionally. All right, that's differentiation of self. You can separate yourself, separate the way you want to function from the way the others in the system would affect you. Okay, so two persons in the family may be having a fight, and you are able to be neutral and deal with them, yet you are emotional about this because you are afraid for your mother because she might be hurt. And you really don't want your father to be hitting your mother, but you can step in there without choosing your mother's side and ask that they bring this to an end while you still have your own personal fears and anxieties on this side. Okay? That's how differentiation works. Such changes are reflected in the ability to be in emotional contact in a difficult, emotional, charged problem and not feel compelled to preach about others, what others should do. All right? So it's like what I was saying. You can intervene in a situation. You can, try to normalize it, but you do not have to be telling people exactly what they will need to do. All right? It says that the changes are reflected in their ability to be in an emotional contact with a difficult emotional charged problem and not feel compelled to preach to the other person what they ought to do or what they should do. Okay? Families and other social groups tremendously affect how people think, how they feel and act. But individuals vary in their susceptibility. So families and other societal groups So this system can also be applicable to other groups. All right, not just the family. This system could be applicable to the job situation. In your office, on your job, in your classroom, if you are in an adult school or college, these systems kind of tend to play themselves out as well, because the truth is, if you are in school, your class has become your family at that point in time for that period of time. Okay? All right, so families and other social groups tremendously affect how people think, feel, and act, but individuals vary in their susceptibility. So we do not always have to allow what goes on around us, our circumstances, and our environment to influence the way we behave. We can still act who we are in spite of what might be going on in the environment around us. All right? Okay. Now let us look at, it says here, continuing from the previous, from differentiation. Though everyone is born with an inherent self, the degree to which someone develops their sense of self is dependent on familial relationships during childhood and adolescence. So, even though you were born with your individuality, with an inherent self, your individuality, the degree to which someone develops their sense of self is dependent on your family relationships. And family has a way, your family always influences what goes on in your development. All right? Poverty in your family can create some problems for individuals in the family. Wealth in other family may create a different problem for people in a wealthy family. So, for example, somebody might be born into a family of poverty, but they themselves see themselves as not as a victim of their circumstances, but they see themselves as someone who needs to break the cycle and do something for their family. And so they go on to do that. All right. So they may look at their family and said, I will never allow this to happen to me. I think I'm somebody similar to that. I may not have always made certain decisions in terms of other areas of my life, but I knew that I never wanted. My parents had a large family, and we were by no means rich. And I growing up, I thought I was deprived of so many things that I vowed that I would never start a family unless I am capable of taking care of my family's needs, and that's financially. Okay, so I kind of started late because I had a late start to my career and everything like that. So it tends to be late, but if you have that kind of determination, then it's very possible that those things, can work in your favor. On the other hand, somebody who may have been born into wealth might take the wealth for granted and decided that, I can just live free, don't try to pursue a career, don't try to make, take advantage of my parents' situation, just waste, spend, have a good time, get drunk, get high. They do all that kinds of stuff, and then they run into all these kinds of problems. On the other hand, your family may be a quiet, easygoing family who prides themselves in being functional. And so, coming up in a family like that, you tend to adopt that kind of outlook at life, and you help, it still helps to develop your self, your personality. Okay, so the family of your origin can influence you in many different ways. So what Bowen is saying that though everyone is born with an inherent self, the degree to which someone develops their sense of self is dependent on familial relationships during childhood and adolescence. So it's how we treat our children and how we relate to them. You know, if you keep telling your child they're going to be a failure, maybe that's what they're going to turn out to be. If you keep telling your child you will not turn out to be anything good, I have no hope in you, I believe you're a lost case, you know, all these kinds of negative things people tell their children, those things can affect children as they grow. Okay? So we don't want to do that. Someone with a stronger sense of self is less influenced by others and does not try to push their personality onto other people. So, we got to look at the system. We're trying to understand the system from its inception. So, you have a husband and a wife. Let's start there. Okay? You have a husband and a wife. They may have different backgrounds, different challenges. You know, they see life differently. They approach certain things in life differently. Then they add a child to that situation. The child may come up in a situation where they are triangulated, where, you know, because of these differences between their parents, they may even be forced to choose one side or the other. Maybe not in a formal way. They maybe were not forced to say, well, you either choose this side or this side, but because of how things are happening and the way the family functions, that person was forced to be on daddy's side because I see daddy is more caring than mommy. Or that daddy, you know, the way daddy understands things is the way I prefer it. So I'm over here rather than over there. And then that may affect them as they grow up. That may affect them. Eventually, they may become adults now and looking for somebody, trying to find somebody, and then those same little things influence them. Matter of fact, you know, it is said that children who have self-esteem problems, and not only children, because sometimes children grow up with these problems into adulthood, but children who have self-esteem problems, mostly those problems started at home, where nothing positive about the child was, you know, transmitted to that child. The child didn't have many positive influences. If your parents, you know, they use drugs and get drunk and fight often and curse out and abuse out each other, and you coming up in that kind of home, it's going to affect you one way or the other. So, depending on the personality that you develop as a child and coming through the ranks as an adolescent, when you become an adult, in some cases, what Bowen is saying here, someone with a strong sense of self is less influenced by others and does not try to push their personality onto other people. Okay? So we need to have a little clear understanding of that. All right? When you are sure of yourself, you're strong, people do not influence you easily, and you do not try to to impose yourself on other people because you want them to do what you want them to do, the way you want it to always be done. Okay? And then it said that in all families, as well as in society at large, there will always be a mix of people with poor and strong differentiation of self. So you can always find people, you know, strong here, weak there. I think a lot, you know, human nature would suggest to us that these things do happen. So in every family you would find that, and it shouldn't really surprise you. All right? And then there are families. Families vary in their level of emotional interdependence based on the level of differentiation of self of the family members. So, what is this saying? Family, they may vary in their levels of emotional interdependence. So, I might be very dependent on my mom, or a child or a father now might become so dependent on his wife. Let me see if I could give you an example. So, for example, um, because this generation is more computer savvy, a father may feel or a mother may feel, dependent on the child because, they're banking online and all these different things and people are encouraging them to do things online, but they are not as savvy. And because they have to depend on their child to help them out, emotionally, they become interdependent on that child emotionally. It may be because of the relationship that while the wife or the mother had to be away for a long period of time, maybe her job took her away, that the father and the child and the son develop, or the daughter and the father develop such a strong bond that, whenever there are some things going on in the family that, sometimes now the father feels that he has to depend on his daughter for that emotional support rather than he can, because his daughter went through the experience with him. And so things like that happens. All right. So he's saying families vary in their level of emotional interdependence based on the level of differentiation of self of the family members. So as much as I am able to function to do one thing over here and the other thing over here separately, which is differentiation, the interdependence depends a lot on how we differentiate ourselves or how we are differentiated. Okay? So I hope that this brings some clarity. I may have to just go back this over. I think we have come to the end of the session for tonight. I trust that when we come back next week, I probably will go through this again, because knowing these presentations, learning them myself, these concepts myself, it's not easy to comprehend. Sometimes I have to go it over and over and over to ensure that I have an understanding. And even though I'm presenting it to you, there may be something that I have missed and still need to know. And so we can always learn as we go along. So when we come back next week, I'll probably just go over from these concepts, the triangulation and the differentiation of self, before we move into the other concepts. But thank you so much for tuning in tonight and for joining us on Family Focus at New Jersey House of Hope. I trust that some of these information would help you to understand some of the struggles that are going on in your home, some ways in which your family functions at home, and why you're having certain problems at your home. And I'm saying to you that you can use these information and apply it gradually. You can call us, contact us to get some help if you would like to. We are available to try to do our utmost to reach to you. At this point in time, I can tell you that there is no charge for this service, and there's no intention of charging you for this service if you're getting it through New Jersey House of Hope, because hope lives here. And so if you need help, again, you can go back to the previous presentations, re-listen them, and you can pull out the concepts that you think may apply to your family situation. Your family might be experiencing something, and then you remember that, oh yes, I think I heard that. You can go back into those presentations, look at it, and always pull out and use what is applicable to your family situation. So I trust that these presentations are going to be a benefit to you, and that God is going to bless your family and make it functional and a blessing not only to you, but to those that you may come into contact with. May God bless you as we bow our heads for prayer. Father in heaven, thank you so much for guiding us tonight. We pray that you would have this information to resonate with somebody who may find it useful, and that they may apply it to their lives so that their family can understand their stressful situation and find ways to eliminate those anxieties so that they can function normally and bring glory and honor to your name. We thank you. Please bless their families. In Jesus' name, amen. So good night, everybody, and see you again next Monday night on Family Focus. Until then, may God bless you.
you show. It's not enough